book. And these characters are the German characters and the Jewish character. Now the Jewish character, as you can see, I have some very fine descriptors of the Jew. And the Jewish character is the basis for all interaction between the other German characters. So first the Jew 6 and the danglers are something that I'd like to focus on, and the Jew 6 is the figure of a Jewish nose, shaped like a 6. And the danglers are big lips that Jews have. It's also a sign of being a criminal, according to their Giftpilz. Now, as you can see, this Jew right here has the whole package. He's fat, big nose, big ears, the Jewish lip. And these two German characters are interacting while they look in on this Jew, showing the reader that this is a common experience. The narratives reveal a Jew's thinking, their behavior, and their ideology. The German, on the other hand's appearance is not described. Rather, these Germans have three character types that emerge. First, the ignorant, or the unknowing. The ignorant or the unknowing disbelieves or doesn't see the necessity in the Jewish question. He or she is in denial. And he's willing to interact with the Jew because he's in that denial. This character type, though, is proof for those who may have thought that they were immune to the Jewish question, because the German then learns and is reformed. The reformed character has a moment of clarity, a realization, and it transcends improper thinking. This character type is reborn. But the mature character is one that reforms the ignorant, brings all the character types along to end up, again, with the uniformed vision, the life that Nazism has created for Germany. The ignorant interacts with the Jew, or the unknowing interacts with the Jew, and the reformed, he did interact with the Jew and found better, but the mature, never. The mature quote, probably the best, is this quote right down here, and it says that the Jews are our misfortune. A mature German child must know this well, or the mature ideology must know this well. The last part of character development is seen in the poems. It's not worth to read this poem out loud. You can read it by yourselves, please. But the idea is that the characters are developed through these poems, whereas the poem isn't an accompaniment to the chapter or to the narrative, something like a picture would be, where it describes something that happens in the narrative. The poem actually comes from the voice of the characters themselves. These sayings, when recalled from memory, reflects a cultural recognition of the Jew's evil, memorialized. It is a fictitious tie to a spurious, fantastic past. Through the interactions, the German learns and forms relationships. This brings me to the next relational aspect of my research. And they form relationships by what I'll call the didactic narrative. This is a narrative that teaches. The didactic narrative is where one character claims that the Jew is vile, evil, disgusting, and so forth. The other character, however, the disbeliever, the ignorant character, says, "You are crazy, and I wouldn't believe that even if you put a gun to my head." Exaggeration for the kids' book, but not so much in this sense. The characters then play out a narrative where they come to a conclusion that the ignorant was wrong and the mature was in fact right. These narratives are, this one particular narrative is here, with Kurt and Otto. Kurt is the mature, and Otto is the immature, and you can see he has a little surprised look on his face about what he's seeing. They went through this didactic relationship builder, and at the end, they formed a relationship between Kurt and Otto. Friends formed relationship based off of this interaction, or this informing upon these evil Jewish characters. The characters in the narratives, when their doubt disappears, they form more trusting relationships with the bearer of knowledge, or the mature characters. Doubt is only allowed to exist in their Giftpilz to the extent that it is corrected. And this didactic narrative is a teaching tool directing the reader's attention towards right cultural cues and right identities, and proper relationships to foster as well. The relationships fostered are in chapters 8, 9, 11, 12, 14, and 15. And that's the middle aspect where it describes the Jews' behavior, and so the Germans will interact and form these didactic relationships, these learning relationships, teaching relationships. A couple of them, or all of them, there's 6, is cultivates with the German system. He informs the Jew into the police and trusts the system and is praised by the system. The youth, the mother told her daughter to go to Dr. Bernstein, which turned out to be a bad idea, and the youth was actually right about the Jewish question. Cultural loyalty, the 2 women in the back, you can see right here, they were swindled. They got in an argument, and then they hired lawyers to fix their argument, and the lawyers swindled them. Well, I guess the Germans won't be getting into arguments anymore. Friends, as we just talked about, a mother, where the relationship and trust is directed towards the mother, where she explains to her daughter how all their money is gone because of the Jew. And finally, with Worker Hartman, who's standing front row and center, front row left, he finds Nazism the only true path. So these are relationships that, through a narrative interaction, foster 6 character types, 6 relational types. The didactic narratives, or relationships and narratives, validate belief, build relationships, and assuage doubt. The narratives give the reader all the reason in the world to trust these characters and also engage the Jewish question. This part makes my thesis interdisciplinary. That's a plug. Intercultural theory, I found, assists persuasive identity management, or rhetorical identity management. There are 2 concepts when you're thinking interculturally: ascription and avowal. These are 2 different types of identities. Ascription is what we think others think about us. And ascribe is what we think of ourselves, or avowed is what we think of ourselves. In the ascription category, the Jew knows that the German knows about his evil ways, meaning the Jew understands what the other thinks about him. The German also knows that the Jew thinks that the German is a target. So the German knows what the Jew thinks about him. Now in the avowed camp, the most often you have the Jew being projected as knowing his evil ways. And then, so the Jew knows himself as evil, and the German knows the Jew as evil. So, and then the German embodies 3 different types of characters, which we said: the unknowing, reformed, and mature, and they throughout avow different transforming, reforming, or validating personas, identities. According to intercultural scholars Collier and Thomas, when the avowal and ascribed identities match together, like they do in this model, cultural competence develops. Now, the cultural competence that they were talking about was hopefully to bridge a cultural gap, not distance it. But here, what's interesting is that the cultural gap is bridged by having the German understand what the new evil is, and they're acquainting it with that evil. By acquainting it with that evil, the Jew has become dehumanized, because the Jew knows he's not even human, because the Jew knows he's evil. So this dehumanized version matches, the German sees dehumanized Jew, the Jew sees dehumanized Jew together. But in chapter 16, the picture you see here, it's a little bit different. The Jew refutes all stereotypes that the Germans might have. So now the model doesn't match. The avowal of the Jew doesn't match with how the German ascribes him. By virtue of this discrepancy, the Jew becomes humanized. And through that humanization, he's no longer just the evil Jew. He has a voice, albeit weak. The overwhelming German maturity sitting at this table overpowers the Jew and sends him running. Now, Collier and Thomas, they state that when this intercultural clash happens where the model doesn't match, intercultural gaps spur up and friction happens. So I asked, why does one of these identity sets create a competence with evil while the other tries to create a cultural gap and accentuate difference? Well, the matching identity enhances knowledge of evil, which is necessary because the German must know that evil and be able to attack it. The competence is to be able to attack this other culture. The discrepancy between the Jew and the German's identity and the vowel and ascription accentuates the differences, thus causing difference between them. So the humanized Jew, the one that has the voice, is now the German reader and their Giftpilz sees them as different. We should distance ourselves from them. However, the Jew as dehumanized, we should become competent about them, become close to them, and kill them. The push away from the humanized and the pull towards the dehumanized makes these identities utterly persuasive. Is there an intimate relationship between reality and the way that reality is described? Through these elements, a fantasy world is painted, and it leads young Germans towards Nazi ideology. The world, the characters, and the interactions point to a child directed through an Uber narrative. And it provides a template for justifying action and informing belief. Their Giftpilz provides a canvas for depicting two paralleling ideas: the rise of Germany and the degradation of the Jew. Their Giftpilz essentially redefines Jewish essence. While highlighting relationships, ideologies, and identities, this propaganda rectified wrong thinking and disobedience from a Nazi perspective. Their Giftpilz presents an ideology that develops and exploits an irrational fear of the Jew. That fear then functions like a superstition that irrationally gives more meaning and power to a basic symbol than that symbol warrants. Placing faith in superstitious generalities is arguably the goal of their Giftpilz. When this inflated symbolic meaning is given to a child, it is like candy on an empty stomach. It is easy to swallow, but hardly satisfying or fully nourishing in the end. Eat up, my young propagandies. For the future, I'd like to change this picture into a relic of the past. Unfortunately, pictures like this are all too modern. Perhaps scholars can use FTA, fantasy theme analysis, and study similar rhetorical documents of a modern ilk and help understand these hateful ideologies and why people end up behaving the way they do. Through studying the source of ideology, we can uncover mechanisms that create this hateful fantasy world and meet our next generations head on. Perhaps we can not repair the ideological damage incurred, but we can strive to mitigate its inevitable chaos. Thank you. Other questions? It's locked. There's another door. But I'll let James
I want to interrupt you. It was a great presentation from the hall.
Good. Yes.
Cassie, did they use the same model for the homosexuals and the gypsies? Did they use the same approach?
Did they use the same approach? Well, the gypsies were, and the homosexuals, undesirables were, but Jews allowed for that to happen to these other undesirables. This was the fantasy. The Jew was the overarching evil. And then there were other undesirables that were clearly problems, but the Jew was the source of that problem.
Is this concept happening again today? Has this come back around for us?
In the last, this is my father for all of those who didn't meet him.